But the first thing I did is I said, what is it that society expects of you as men? What are these external expectations? And sometimes we call this the man-in-the-box activity. How many of you have ever done the man-in-the-box activity? A couple of people. All right, this is a great activity. How we would do this is we would put a whiteboard up and we put a box, and I would say to all of you, how is it that society expects men to think, feel, and behave, or not think, not feel, and behave? And you'd shout a whole bunch of stuff, and we'd fill this in, right? It's a great activity, a wonderful thing to do. It really points out our expectations of men. But what I want to do is I want to show you how the men who participated in this study filled this in. And they talked about it chronologically, right? So at the very earliest of ages, when they're in elementary school, you have to be tough and don't cry. When you're in first grade, you prove your manhood. When you're in first grade, you prove your manhood by being tough and not crying. I'm 41 years old. Those rules still apply to me. We've just added a whole bunch on, right? Those don't go away. We just keep adding to it, right? So it's cumulative. Later on, maybe in junior high, it's about breaking the rules, getting girls, swearing. I never swore more in my life than when I was in fourth grade, and that's impressive because I swear a lot, okay? But I really swore a lot, and it was about proving my manhood, fighting. And then in high school, it's about being competitive, maybe playing sports, being good at whatever it is, proving that you're not gay. And how would you prove that you're not gay? By sex, heterosexual sex with girls or women, drinking. And then in college, and that's our focus. So in college, what is expected of us? Again, these never go away. They stay, but we just keep adding. It's about partying. And partying is 5 things about drinking to excess. So whatever is socially acceptable to drink, you got to go beyond that. So if it's socially acceptable to not drink in this environment, drinking works. If it's socially acceptable to have 12 beers, you got to have 15. So whatever is socially acceptable in that context, you have to drink to excess. Doing drugs, competitive heterosexual sex, competing over who you're having it with, how often you're having it, the ways that you're having it, competitive heterosexual sex, not preparing for academics, and then again, breaking the rules, which could be anything from pulling down a bulletin board to being loud in the dining hall to whatever the case may be, right? So these are what these men, with great unanimity, said, this is what society expects of us as college men. Then they talked about what happens after college. So in life, they thought they would have to do things like be an authority, be the breadwinner, be respected, be the provider, not showing emotions, not feminine, all of these different things, right? And my bet is none of that's a surprise to any of you. Maybe you don't think about it exactly in that way, but you all know this, right? These are the expectations. Whether you're a man or you're not a man, you know this is what we expect. So some of it's maybe a little bit different, but we would have done this activity in much the same way. And then what we talked about is what happens, how do we reinforce this? What happens if you don't behave like that? What if you don't do what's in that box or you do things outside that box? And the language that people use to reinforce this box is very clear and very quickly sorts into 2 categories of homophobia and misogyny. So the boundaries of what it means to be a man is policed through misogyny and through homophobia, right? We use misogyny and homophobia to police men's behavior. And then we also have other forms of oppression that also police this. One of the ways that racism works is it seeks to emasculate men of color, and then they perform to this the same way. One of the ways that classism works, it seeks to emasculate working class men because of the status of the car, the clothes they wear, the job they have, right? And so they turn to misogyny and homophobia to police other men's masculinity and to prop up their own masculinity. So scholars call this the traditional hegemonic definition of masculinity. You can call it that, you can call it toxic. Bloggers call it toxic masculinity. There's lots of different things we can say about this. And this is the masculinity. This is the dominant masculinity that we all know across lots of difference and even across genders. But it's not the only masculinity. It is the masculinity, but it's not the only masculinity. There are also these cultural masculinities, right? There's these different versions of masculinity, which are all derivatives of this dominant masculinity. It's amending this because society won't let me be seen as a man because I'm a man of color, because of racism. So we're going to amend that so I can still be seen as a man in spite of that. Or as a working class man, I can't be a man because of the status of my job. So we're going to amend working class masculinity to be so I can prove it in this ways. And you have these many masculinities, but then we also have to point out that none of these masculinities are monolithic either, right? What black masculinity is here in Northfield is very different than a black masculinity in Washington, D.C., right? What working class masculinity is here in Northfield is different than what it is in our north in Minneapolis where I live, right? Working class masculinities are different. So each of these are plurals as well. There are many different kinds of gay masculinity. There are many different kinds of Jewish masculinities, right? And so this is the traditional hegemonic definition of masculinity. This is often what it feels like. It feels like the world works for you. You got to have that haircut. You got to wear that suit. You got to look like a young Ben Affleck in his prime, right? And it looks like the world works for you, but how you experience it is bound in by these little glass boxes that nobody else can see. And this is very much how I experience it. I'm someone with enormous amounts of social privilege because of my identities. And I am bound in by how society tells me I need to be, think, not be as a man in many different ways. And it often feels like those confines are just for me and nobody else sees it. And so this traditional hegemonic definition of masculinity positions men above other genders. We'll call that sexism. Places men above other genders, places some men above other men, places white men above men of color, places middle-class men above working-class men, and it limits all men. It limits all men, right? What Michael Kaufman calls the paradox of masculinity is that objectively we know that society works for men, but subjectively men don't feel that way. And if you don't feel like society is set up for you, and people keep telling you that it's set up for you, that creates quite a bit of dissonance, right? And so we see how that plays out.